Hello, good evening, welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight. Yat Haumidakiapi, my name is Tom Goldtooth. Dakota Chaze Makupi Matho Awayakapi Hemakiapido. Dene Navajo Ka Dakota Miedo. I am the Executive Director of the Indigenous Environmental Network and one of the member organizations of the Green New Deal National Network and a member of the coordinating team. A quick note on logistics. Closed captioning is available if you're watching on Facebook and YouTube. Twitter closed captioning will show for those on desktops. There's also a Spanish caption version available on greennewdealnetwork.org. greennewdealnetwork.org. If you're watching this on social media, please share this video right now so that more of your friends can join us. And throughout this call, share your thoughts by commenting or replying on Facebook and Twitter using hashtag #TimeToThrive. Thanks again for being here. Amidst multiple devastating and overlapping crises from the pandemic, racial injustice, anti-indigenism and erasure, economic devastation, and energy and climate injustice, we now have a historic opportunity and responsibility to set our future towards a Green New Deal, a climate and care, jobs and justice agenda for the future. For the first time in a decade, Democrats control Congress and the White House. This is because for years, our movements have been growing and building power from the bottom up. Within the first 2 weeks of the Biden administration already, we're seeing that victories are possible, from the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee to the Civilian Conservation Corps. It's good to see President Biden fulfilling some of his campaign promises and listening to our movement. We should celebrate, but we know there is still much work to do. We know that the fossil fuel industry, wealthy elites, and status quo politicians are scheming and preparing to make sure that little progress gets made with false climate solutions that do not cut emissions at source, and little progress that actually helps working people, Black, Brown, Indigenous, and rural communities. They are prioritizing their wallets instead of the public interest of the country, and again, are hell-bent on preventing meaningful and real action on climate change and global warming. It will take all of us working together to make our voices heard and demand real transformation and goals towards systemic change. We are engaged with both eyes open. This is not our first rodeo. This is not the time for incremental steps that will then be watered down even further in bad faith negotiations. It's time for bold and ambitious vision and action. Tonight, we'll talk about the Thrive Agenda, the plan that will create millions of good, safe jobs with access to people, to labor and unions, and with public investments directly in Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities and our Native nations. You will leave the call with concrete action steps and updates on what's next. It's going to be a great night, so let's get started. The Indigenous Environmental Network, a grassroots network, has been working with the broad coalition of organizations for the last year called the Green New Deal Network. The Green New Deal Network is a campaign in 50 states within Indigenous Native nations and in commonwealths. At the national level, the coalition is made up of 15 membership-based organizations: Center for Popular Democracy, Climate Justice Alliance, Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, U.S. Greenpeace, Indigenous Environmental Network, Indivisible, Movement for Black Lives, Move On, People's Action, Right to the City Alliance, Service Employees International Union, Sierra Club, Sunrise Movement, the U.S. Climate Action Network, and the Working Families Party. Nationally, statewide, tribally, and locally, we are building powerful coalitions to win climate, care, just, and job creating policies at every level. On the federal level, we are advocating and building the movement for the Thrive Agenda. This is not a flash in the pan. It is a place for coordinating strategy for the multiracial and the multicultural movement for climate, jobs, and justice. Our hope today is that you leave here excited about what we can achieve if we can take action together. To say more about the political moment and the Thrive Agenda, I'm going to pass it on to Varshini, and thank you. Akeha Wopida Do.
Thank you so much, Tom. It has been just a deep honor to work with you on this project. Thank you for all the work you have done in the fight for environmental justice for so many decades. And you all at IEN have just inspired me and so many others. So thank you for being here. And thank you to all of you who are watching and joining in. My name is Varshini. I am the Executive Director of Sunrise Movement. I'm so proud to be here. And, you know, a lot of the reason why I'm here is because I work at an organization where we bring thousands of young people into politics, into movement for the first time in their lives. And I see the way that the crisis is impacting the next generation. There isn't a single young person today who has grown up without the specter of the climate crisis just looming over them. And I remember this question that we asked ourselves again and again when we were first starting Sunrise was, you know, where are the adults in the room? Like, why haven't our political leaders dealt with this crisis that is now forcing thousands of climate refugees in Honduras to risk their lives to make it to safety, that has destroyed homes and land and millions and millions and millions of animals from fires and hurricanes and floods. This economy of extraction and of trashing that has forced tribal nations and poor communities and Black and brown communities to become the dumping grounds for toxic waste. But, you know, the hope I have is in witnessing this new generation wake up and rise up, watching 13-year-olds making phone calls to get people out to vote, high schoolers who are striking in the streets and coordinating actions. We're no longer waiting for those around us to act. We are taking on that responsibility ourselves. And so are so many of you who are joining us in this intergenerational fight for a just and sustainable world. And, you know, we have such a huge opportunity ahead of us. For the first time in a decade, Democrats control Congress and the administration, which gives them a tremendous ability to enact change. And so many of us worked tirelessly for years, organizing, building power, especially during this last election cycle, to get that opportunity. I know that was literally the dream when we created Sunrise 4 years ago, and it's incredible to see a piece of that manifesting now today. So in the next 100 days, Congress and the administration can act boldly to get relief to those who are struggling, and to make sure that we're also on the path to rebuilding our economy over the long term. So it's fairer, cleaner, more prosperous, and more just, and we can make them do it. So the first 100 days is a super critical time. A lot of political scientists have found that a president's influence over Congress is significantly higher right at the outset compared to later on in their administration. So back in the day, in 1933, FDR coined this term and set the 100-day standard, which basically all presidents have been measured against since. FDR was able to lay the groundwork for the New Deal in his first 100 days. Lyndon B. Johnson was pushed by the civil rights and the labor movements in his first 100 days for the ultimate passage of the Civil Rights Act and Medicare. So to put it super bluntly, the first 100 days are when new presidents have the most power. And the first 100 days are when we have to make sure that they get the political imperative to be bold. So we don't have any time to waste. And the good news is, because of a lot of our organizing, the Biden administration has indicated that they will propose a comprehensive just economic recovery proposal soon. Soon as in like this month. And that is going to be a proposal for rebuilding and renewal on a historic scale. And so what the president proposes, that's going to be the starting point for Congress's plan. And so what he proposes is going to have a considerable impact on what Congress ultimately passes. So that doesn't mean that members of Congress are off the hook, however, from feeling our pressure. And there's two pieces to this equation. One is dealing with the reality that the Democratic margins are very narrow in the House, and in the Senate, it's a flat out tie that can only be broken by the vice president. So constant grassroots organizing, encouraging our members of Congress to do the right thing in all 50 states is going to be critical. We're also going to need every single Democrat to be on program, and just that will be a massive effort. The second piece is, the fact that Republicans are reconsolidating around Trump. We're already seeing them issue calls to move past January 6th, and we know that they're going to do everything in their power to minimize or kill a recovery package that can actually serve our communities in the long term. They're going to have think tanks powered by the billionaire class and spending big on disinformation campaigns to back them up too. So winning the Thrive agenda to ensure a bold, just recovery and a climate package is going to take everything that we've got. And now I'm going to pass it to Margaret to share a bit about why the Thrive agenda is exactly what we need to be pushing right now.
Thanks, Varshini. So my name is Margaret Clausen, and I'm the Green New Deal National Organizer with Grassroots Global Justice. So as I'm sure all of you have experienced, last year was a life-changing year for almost all of us. And I know that for me in New York City, it was filled with a mix of uncertainty and fear and inspiration and purpose. Uncertainty and fear because my roommate was one of the first 50 people in New York City to test positive for the virus after advocating for hours that she needed a test. And while my roommate thankfully survived her case, at its peak, 1,000 people in New York City were dying every day. The year was also filled with inspiration and purpose because we saw historic uprisings in defense of Black lives over the summer when millions of people took to the streets, as well as workers going on strike in the Strike for Black Lives. As Tom said, we are facing multiple crises at once. The COVID pandemic, accelerating climate change, the searing effects of structural racism, massive unemployment, and millions of families on the brink of eviction. But we are more prepared than ever, and we have the momentum. When there is political will, we know that transformative change is possible. If there is one thing that the original New Deal showed us, it is that we can create millions of jobs if we make it a priority. What we also know is that the New Deal wasn't for many of us, leaving out huge sectors of society, including Black workers, Indigenous people, and femmes. But we can do the Green New Deal differently, and it starts with the Thrive agenda. The problems we face are big, but so is our vision. And at the Green New Deal Network, I think that we really understand that the goal of recovery shouldn't be to go back to what it was, but to actually advance us to a healthier, more just world. So the Thrive agenda says, let's invest in good jobs, in green, low carbon jobs that include the life-giving essential labor of care workers like nurses and teachers and workers who care for the elderly and most vulnerable. Let's invest in jobs building affordable and energy efficient housing and workers who can retrofit buildings from schools to offices to broader housing. Let's invest in the dignity and livelihood of campesinos and campesinas, Black farmers and small farmers producing food in more sustainable ways. Let's put millions of people to work building wind turbines, installing solar panels, and expanding public transportation and maintaining electric infrastructure. The Thrive agenda talks about how we can do all of this. We can make investments in care and climate jobs that are good jobs that pay a decent wage and have strong benefits with workers who are represented in a union. We can also do it in a way that makes sure jobs and investments are distributed equitably. Investing first in the communities that were left behind in the economy of the past and that were harmed by environmental racism. We can prioritize Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities hit first and worst by climate change, as well as displaced workers who will need to transition. There's so much to be done, but it is necessary, and our movements have the solutions. So Thrive, it stands for transform, heal, renew by investing in a vibrant economy. The Thrive Agenda is a broad and bold vision to address the many ways that our economy and society are currently not set up to work for us. And so with that, I'm going to pass it back to Varshini.
Yes, Margaret, that sounds good. Transform, heal, renew by investing in a vibrant economy. That is what I want to be fighting for. And so you might know, but there are actually 8 Thrive pillars that make up the different components of the plan. That could look like ranging from averting climate and environmental catastrophe to investing in Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities to creating millions of good, unionized, high-paying jobs. And I'm not going to go through every single one right now, but encourage y'all to look through the website and learn more about each one. But I think Margaret and I are going to take a second to highlight a few that we really love. One of the ones I'm just thrilled about is the first one. So creating millions of good, safe jobs with access to unions. We need to be investing in things like building clean and affordable public transit, expanding wind and solar power, upgrading broken infrastructure, supporting family farmers and agricultural workers. And all of these things create jobs. And in fact, economists estimate that a bold economic renewal plan, like the one that's outlined in Thrive, would create nearly 16 million new jobs and sustain them over a decade. That means the Thrive Agenda would create enough jobs for all of the 14 million people who are currently unemployed US workers to go back to work, building a more just, healthy, and stable economy. And it would create good jobs for people who currently work in the fossil fuel industry, so everyone is included in the transition. Thrive would essentially eliminate the unemployment crisis. And we need to make sure that through all of this, we are fighting to build worker power and for these jobs to become the family supporting jobs that every single person deserves. Margaret, do you want to share a bit about what you think a key pillar of Thrive is? One of your faves?
Yeah, absolutely. Just hearing you say 16 million jobs, that's incredible. So, we're definitely at GGJ invested in all 8 pillars. And at the same time, I think our members are finding it particularly important that Thrive includes pillar number 3, which is investing in Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. Our communities have been excluded and oppressed and harmed by environmental racism. And now we're facing the worst impacts of the climate crisis. Thrive calls for 40% of the investment to go into these areas to support job creation, pollution reduction, and climate resilience. And it's really key that the most affected communities have the power to democratically plan, implement, and administer these projects. And I just have to say that close to our hearts at GGJ is also the fact that it's going to be an investment in care work. In December alone, 140,000 jobs were lost, and all of those were held by women, and largely in this sector. So we're really excited to see that Thrive is investing in domestic and care work as key elements of a new economy that we're trying to build.
Totally, that's really important. Yeah, the last one I just want to highlight is pillar 8, which is reinvesting in public institutions that enable workers and communities to thrive. As you all know, we're facing some really huge crises, and it's going to take a massive government-wide effort to put us back on the right track. So that last pillar is really about rebuilding the public sector, reinventing the government's ability to get the job done. and supporting people along the way to actually believe in our institutions and that government is here to help. And this is about supporting and strengthening the United States Postal Service, strengthening public schools, having funding to support and expand public health care systems at the state and local level, preventing privatization of public lands, water, natural resources, or existing public sector jobs. And so Absolutely. It just feels, yeah, totally. And so it feels really good to actually imagine this as a reality. And I think reading through these pillars, I'm like, oh my God, like I was getting hyped listening to you talk about the ones that you were excited about, Margaret. Because I was like, if this became our reality, like what might this mean for generations down the road? And for us, like literally right now. And so many of us worked immensely hard on this last election. So we can't miss this critical 100-day window of opportunity to push for the Thrive agenda. So just to be really clear about the stakes, Biden and Congress have the most power and opportunity to act right now at the start of the presidency and at the start of the 117th Congress. It only gets harder from here. If we don't organize and if Congress and President Biden fail to deliver meaningful progress on economic recovery, Democrats may lose control of Congress in 2022. And we just can't afford to lose. So in a bit, I'm going to tell you how you can take action immediately on the Thrive agenda and how you can make your voice heard to President Biden and Congress. But before I pass it back to Margaret, I want to highlight something for you to keep in mind. So basically, as soon as President Biden announces his economic recovery plan, which we hope is built around the foundation of the Thrive agenda, Congress is going to begin having this discussion about economic recovery. And at the end of next month and in April, early April, is a super important period in our political calendar. So we should mark it in our own calendars too, because between March 29th and April 9th, so March 29th, April 9th, your representatives and senators are going to leave Washington and be back in your state. And that period of time is basically for the explicit purpose of hearing from their constituents, which is you. And so we have to show a huge display of grassroots energy and momentum for climate, for care, for jobs, for justice, to persuade Congress to go big this year. And a lot of experts are saying that this year could be our best last chance to pass a major rebuilding package, including significant investments in moving away from carbon. So if you sign up to take action on the Thrive agenda or sign up at our website, we are going to make sure that you hear about our plans for the congressional recess as they develop. Back to you, Margaret.
Thanks, Varshini. So we've been talking about the Thrive agenda on the federal level and the ways you can get involved there. However, it's also a framework that has transformational local impacts, that would have transformational local impact if passed. And so in the chat, I was wondering, if you could put in what would change in your community? What could you imagine in your community if the Thrive agenda was actually enacted? And so now, as we're waiting for those to come in, and I'm definitely excited to hear about what you all are thinking for the potential of this framework in your own local context. We're going to hear from some leaders in New York and West Virginia about the movement building work that they're doing at the state level, because that's where a lot of this is going down, a lot of the organizing for this, and what winning a Thrive agenda could look like in our communities. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Morgan Sell, who was born and raised in Jefferson County, West Virginia, and is a community organizer working to protest and improve the quality of life for all West Virginians. She is the director of campus ministry and youth programs at Shepherdstown Presbyterian Church, president of the Eastern Panhandle Green Coalition, and currently the West Virginia regional organizer of the West Virginia Jobs and Climate Alliance. I'm going to pass it to you, Morgan.
Thanks, Margaret. Good evening, everyone. So grateful to be with you all here tonight during this important and exciting time in America's history, during these first 100 days of a new presidency. My name is Morgan Sell. I'm honored and humbled to share this perspective of how this economic recovery plan, this Thrive agenda, will help the people in West Virginia. For far too long, our state has been seen in the public eye as the leader in things like obesity and drug overdoses, and most recently, racism and xenophobia. Often in the news for chemical spills or mine disasters, we are far past due for a narrative shift here in West Virginia. As you know, our state and others have carried the weight of our nation's fossil fuel addiction, and our working families have been used as pawns to further justify investing into this dying or retiring coal industry. Our people are leaving the state in droves, leaving behind dilapidated infrastructure and mine-scarred landscapes that were abandoned when the blood flow of this coal economy left the region. This economic recovery plan, this Thrive agenda, which is grounded in the principle of reparations for tribal nations, Black and Brown communities, and rural communities of coal country, addresses the very importance and priority of a federally funded and equitably administered just transition now. Our people are hungry for opportunity. A just transition in West Virginia is not about tackling climate change. For us, it is simply about keeping a roof over our heads and food on the table. As noted in the Thrive agenda, a transition is just only if frontline stakeholders are involved in the molding of the solutions that are then in turn supported by these policymakers. By establishing a Just Transition Task Force, as well as a National Commission on Energy Democracy and Renewable Energy Future, we can shift the investment priorities and provide displaced fossil fuel workers with good-paying union jobs in the clean energy sector. This is not a bottom-up or a top-down scenario. This is a holistic approach that incorporates broader funding sources to invest in and retrain folks who lie within these impacted communities. This is not a replacement of coal. It is an evolution of the birthright of these workers as energy producers in the region. A strong Thrive recovery would help to pass and fully fund the Reclaim Act, as well as the Abandoned Mine Land Reauthorization Act, which houses the Abandoned Mine Land Pilot Program. These broader funding sources, as described above, could then continue to support job creation in West Virginia through supporting folks like Brandon Dennison, CEO of Coalfield Development Corporation. These incubator programs like Coalfield Development, which have previously gotten funding from federal entities like the Appalachian Regional Committee, could then continue to recover and reclaim Appalachia. Coalfield has trained over 1,200 people in new economic sectors, supported and grown 50 new businesses statewide, and rehabilitated over 200,000 square feet of abandoned mine lands. They have put people back to work while also helping them to achieve a college degree. By unlocking people's creative power to transform perceived problems into opportunities in the communities we call home, Coalfield is ending cycles of generational poverty and providing internal healing for the people and external healing for the land. This is just one example of a ground-up approach, just a peek into a solution that could be replicated throughout the state when the federal government commits to pumping flexible resources into what has already been shown to be working here in West Virginia. These testimonies will empower Congress to take on this bold legislation to repower America the right way, the just way, the honorable way, put millions of people to work across this nation, and help to build a clean energy economy. These next 100 days are critical. And today, on Groundhog Day, the sun shines on West Virginia. And although we can survive 6 more weeks of winter, we cannot thrive without a bold commitment to our economic recovery in this state. And as an Appalachian solar company called Solar Holler says, it is time to mine the sun. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Folks of West Virginia clearly know what's up. We need a transition that is going to be taking into account both workers and the communities living next to these sites. So thank you again, Morgan. And now I'm going to bring on Kathy Hughes, and I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker because I used to work at the New York Professional Nurses Union, and I know how hard nurses have been working this past year. So this is Kathy Hughes, a critical care and trauma nurse, who's been a critical care and trauma nurse for many years and was a member of SEIU before becoming the director of the Nurse Alliance of SEIU California. As a part of the healthcare team, the Nurse Alliance represents nurses on a statewide level regarding the nursing profession, patient care, and health policy. I'm going to pass it to you, Kathy.
It helps if the old lady can figure out how to unmute herself. Thanks, Margaret. Thanks for having me.
You're fine. You're doing fantastic.
Yeah. The Service Employees International Union, SEIU, is a 2 million member union with our largest sectors being healthcare and public employees. I'm so proud to be representing our union today, and even more proud to be representing our 35,000 registered nurses in California, the majority of whom work in the public sector and public health. The devastating impact of climate change really has become a public health emergency. It becomes more evident every day, but recent events shine a beacon on the problem. Intermittent climate-induced catastrophes such as wildfires, hurricanes, and flooding, or the resulting daily grind on people's health, such as respiratory disease from toxic pollution or heat stress from increasing levels of heat. Climate change is pulling on our system, especially our public health system, to the point of breakage. While many of us have recognized for years how hard hit our Black, Brown, Indigenous communities and other underserved areas are by the negative results of climate change, until COVID, not many people had any idea what public health was or did. There's a reason why the term safety net is often used to describe healthcare and funding in our public sector. The population largely served by public health are the people I just mentioned. They depend on the public health system to treat the diseases and chronic illnesses often exacerbated, if not caused, by climate change. Not to mention the impact structural racism has had on the social determinants of health and healthcare disparities. Here's a perfect example. I live about 15 minutes from Paradise, California. I could literally see the flames on the ridge from my house. You've probably all heard of that town because it made national news. It got a lot of attention. And while I can tell you that it had a devastating effect on our already underfunded rural public health system, we also received tons of assistance. Just a couple of days after the fire that leveled an entire town of mostly white, lower and middle class people, 25% of whom were over the age of 65, an empty department store in a neighboring town where I live was set up to provide every service you can think of to help with recovery. Whether it was the DMV assisting with identification, access to healthcare and mental health services, other social services, housing resources, or gift cards for everything you can imagine. While we are still recovering and will for decades, Flint, Michigan is still without clean water. Can anyone tell me what the difference is? I can keep that within California if it helps. In LA County, we still have communities suffering from lead poisoning and the less than snail-paced cleanup efforts. To keep that in the realm of climate change, every year during wildfire season, our agricultural and other essential workers are required to keep working in the toxic smoke, while many of us have the luxury of air conditioning, proper PPE, which we now all know what that is, and healthcare benefits that don't rely on a broken public health system. The wealthy can hire private fire services, even while first responders already tend to respond first to affluent communities. That's why SEIU public health nurses like Maribel Castillon, who's watching today, not only are involved in our environmental justice fight, but also volunteer at vaccine injection sites all over our state to make sure that our most vulnerable communities have access to quality care and safe living conditions. Public health, including our nurses, are the lifeline for communities they serve, and our most vulnerable communities are only vulnerable because of decades and decades of structural racism. We need federal and state action to address our need for resilience in the face of a changing climate. We need big investment in infrastructure, and part of that infrastructure is about people and what we're calling social infrastructure to create strong, resilient communities and the ability to respond to the growing climate crisis, especially in the public health arena. That's why SEIU is proud to be part of the Green New Deal Network and support Thrive. Thanks again for having me.
Wow, thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you so much, Morgan. Those were incredibly powerful stories, and I feel like just clearly articulated why we need this full push on federal, state, and local all at once. And you also exemplify so much like why I believe in this vision and I'm fighting for it so hard. And I am feeling fired up. I wish I could see where all of you are right now who are tuning in. Unfortunately, I can't, but it would be great if you could just share with each other. How are you feeling? Are you ready for us to win the Thrive agenda? Are you motivated and excited by what folks have shared here today? And I hope it was a resounding yes, because this is where we are going to be asking you to take action alongside us and take action right now. So my first ask for you is, we need President Biden to take meaningful action that addresses climate, economy, racial inequality, and the pandemic all at once. And we want Biden to adopt the Thrive principles in his plans for an economic stimulus and recovery. And we want to send his administration grassroots messages. So you can use the link that you're going to see on your screen on your desktop, tablet, or your phone, and send the Biden administration a message to help us show how much the public supports Thrive. So that's linktr.ee/Thrive agenda. Again, that's linktr.ee/Thrive agenda. And you can click on the link that says Write to Biden. And there's a message there that you can use or you can modify it. And it is really easy to make your voice heard in this way. And you can do it literally right now as I am talking to you. And again, that link, you need to go to linktr.ee/Thrive agenda. And that's how you can write to Biden, literally right now. And then the second thing, so as we ensure that Biden hears our demand to adopt the Thrive agenda as the central foundation for his plan, members of Congress can take action immediately as well. So right now, members of the House and the Senate can sign their name onto the Thrive resolution. And we really need members of Congress to publicly commit to fighting for legislation that upholds the 8 pillars of the Thrive agenda. So it's really important that members of the House and Senate sign on to the Thrive resolution now, just as it's an important pressure to the Biden administration as well. So the great thing about this is you can use the exact same link that we just talked about. So linktr.ee/Thrive agenda. It's on your screen. Click on the button that says this time, Write to Congress. And it takes just literally 60 seconds to use this link. There's a template message. You can use it. You can change it, put it in your voice. It takes just a few seconds. But this allows for us to get a lot of messages to both our congressional officials as well as the president. Cool. Thanks everyone for taking action. And I hope you will take action with us every step forward over these next 100 days. And now I'm gonna pass it on to Margaret for an important conversation with our congressional reps.
Yeah, thank you so much, Varshini. I'm really excited about this next panel of folks. It's, all of the representatives who've been having our back, who are our allies in the halls of Congress, who are really pushing forward the Thrive agenda right now and the Green New Deal more broadly. And so one, thanks to all the folks who are already taking action at home right now, planning to write letters and or making calls, signing up on that link. And to the folks who are a part of state organizations who are already engaged in work around the Green New Deal, maybe at your state level, maybe at the local level, and who are plugged into this national federal fight for legislation that could be transformative, like the Thrive agenda. Because again, we're fighting for an economy, for our economy to be transformed over this next period. And it's going to take, quite a few steps to get there. And I think it's really exciting that we're in a place where we've converged so many of our demands and so many of our ideas into one bill that's able to start moving forward in this period. So the Thrive agenda is what we're talking about right now, and that's in part because it's the first step of a Green New Deal. So a Green New Deal being our longest, broadest vision with our and the Thrive agenda as our response to economic recovery. So I'm going to introduce our next panel and give them just one-liner so that they can introduce themselves. But the first person I want to bring on is Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who I'm excited to have speak to you all because she was one of the early sponsors of Thrive. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, Debbie, and then we'll head over to Representative Bowman.
Okay, can you hear me? Thank you. Thank you very much, Margaret. I'm Debbie Dingell. I'm from Michigan. I've been listening to most of this tonight. I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Natural Resources Committee, the two committees of the Congress that deal with environmental issues. But last year, when everybody came to me from many of the environmentalist groups and labor unions and asked me if I would help do Thrive, I was like, where do I sign up right away? And I'm really happy to be with all of you tonight because I think that as we start, this is a new beginning. It's a time for us, I'm going to use Joe Biden's word, to unite, but to unite, to thrive, to transform, to heal, to renew towards building a healthy economy, which is what we want to do. And we do it by building coalitions. First of all, I have to say, even though it's not totally on topic, but hearing Kathy talk about the nurses, I'm a Medicare for All, and I think that we need to think about that in terms of all of this too, because the pandemic has shined a light on how broken our healthcare system is, and too many people cannot afford to go to the doctor or can't go to the doctor. And I'm never going to stop. That is my total goal in life, is to get Medicare for all for every American, like every other country. But tonight we're really talking about the environment as well, and racial justice, but they're all intertwined, because when you look at what is happening in communities, it's those that I've been fighting all day on vaccines, and communities that can't get access to the vaccine because they don't have access to broadband, or they don't have access to computers, or they don't have a car to drive themselves. We need to invest in our communities. And one of the things that we have to do to be successful is to build the coalition. We need to bring everybody together. Last year, some of you, I'm very happy and excited to be here with the Green New Deal, because labor wasn't at the table the last 2 years in the way that they wanted to be. And I made a promise that I would bring labor to the table with the environmentalist communities, the business community, government community. We bring the table and we put everybody at it. This week you saw General Motors make an announcement that no one thought that anybody would make. Now, we've got to make sure we hold them accountable, and we have to keep moving forward. But we've really, I think that what we want to do is to try to bring the environmental advocates, the laborers and leaders, the scientists, the researchers, and government officials together to get this done. And I think Thrive can make us good on that promise. We can create economic equity. We can defeat COVID, which is singularly the thing that we have to do the most, while intentionally confronting the dual crisis of climate change and systematic racism. So I think they want us to go to a panel, and I see another one of my colleagues. So I'll stop here. That's who I am. I can get intense, and we'll answer your questions when you're ready for us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. I want to now pass it to Representative Jamal Bowman to introduce himself. I'm really excited to have you here, particularly with all of the work that care workers did to support your campaign. We're so excited to have you representing this book.
Of course. Good evening, everyone. Peace and love to you all. It's great to be with you all as usual. Thank you so much for your organizing, your fighting, and everything you've done, not just for my campaign, but for this country. So thank you. I'm Jamal Bowman. I'm in New York's 16th District, which is the North Bronx and Lower Westchester County, and just looking forward to continuing our work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so finally, I'm going to pass it to one of the original folks who was really throwing down for the Green New Deal, Senator Ed Markey.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me join you today. This is just absolutely great being on with all of you. So we've come a long way in the last 2 years. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I introduced the Green New Deal 2 years ago this week. And from that moment on, nothing was the same. We were able to kind of catalyze a movement, especially driven by young people in this country, to join in, to demand that we do something that is fundamental, that Green New Deal wasn't just a resolution, it was a revolution calling for 100% clean, renewable, zero emitting energy, a revolution for the right to clean air and water for every single American, a revolution on our streets and at the ballot box, demanding that this existential threat be dealt with. And that is why we have a Green New Deal network. And it's only in the last 2 years since we introduced that resolution that this network has come together. And it is just so exciting for me to be here with Debbie Dingell and with Jamal and with all of you this evening, because this will be a revolution in creation of union jobs. And we put it right into the Green New Deal. Union jobs, prevailing wages, we put it right in there. And we made it very clear this is going to be millions of union jobs that are going to be created. But we also said something else, that we had to do it with environmental justice. We said that we had to put frontline communities, minority communities, communities of color, those who had historically been harmed at the front of the line to get these jobs. And what we say in the Thrive resolution is that 40% of that funding should go to those communities. And that's what Joe Biden has now built into his infrastructure plan, his green energy plan, 40%, dealing with these environmental justice issues that are historic. And so all I can say to you is that this is a movement whose time has come, and we're going to try to build it into every one of the Senate bills that are coming through, so that it's in the reconciliation bills. And if we can't get everything in, then we're just going to have to repeal the filibuster, so that we make sure that we do have justice. And as you know, it's intersectionality. It's racial justice, economic justice, climate justice, health justice, all together. It's intersectionality. It's all of these issues converging, and the climate crisis contains all of them. It shines a very bright spotlight on it. And the Green New Deal, the Sunrise Movement that rose up, I see you, Varshini, and all of you who are here, Sierra Club, this incredible coalition. Our time has arrived, and we need your energy to just keep getting higher and higher and higher, because 2021 is the year in which we're going to write this new history. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Senator Markey. Absolutely. It's clear that the movement is already making an impact. And now in this coalition, there are frontline forces who are ready to step into leadership as well. So it's really exciting that all these forces are converging in this moment. I want to pass it to to Congressman Bowman to talk a little bit about, what or who are our movement's biggest obstacles in passing a bill that's aligned with the Thrive agenda.
So unfortunately, we still have too many of our Democrat colleagues who haven't fully committed or are on board with a Green New Deal as of yet. Unfortunately, they don't share the vision that we share. And I think it's sort of an exercise in a lack of vision and maybe apathy from being within these institutions for far too long. And then obviously our Republican colleagues, particularly our Republican colleagues, not just in the House, but in the Senate. So we have to continue to inform, we have to continue to educate, we have to continue to organize. And even at the White House level, President Biden, I believe his commitment to racial justice, and I believe his commitment to environmental justice, as you all, have pushed him to this point to become the most progressive, have the most progressive platform in presidential history. But the people around him, those who are a part of his cabinet, have to also be on board as well. As we know, policy is also the personnel that you surround yourselves with. So we're going to have to continue to push and organize on our Republican counterparts and our Democrat colleagues to support the Thrive agenda. We have to put pressure on Speaker Nancy Pelosi so that she understands how important this is. Because to echo what Ed and Debbie mentioned, this is our moment to rebuild our country and rebuild the world. This is our FDR moment. This is our New Deal moment. As we respond to COVID, we have to create an economy where everyone has a job, everyone has the dignity of work, dignity of housing, health care, and we're giving people jobs in areas where we're not contributing to the carbon footprint in our planet. So everything from animal agriculture to universal daycare, to nurses, to teachers, to health aides, to growing the care economy overall, that's the vision. No one in the wealthiest nation on earth should not have a job and should not be housed and should not have what they need to not just survive, but to thrive. But we got to keep the pressure on. We got to keep organizing. We got to keep educating because, as we know, there are millions of people across the country who still haven't leaned in yet to the Thrive agenda and the Green New Deal. But it's our job to get to work on that. And I'm just excited that, 3 weeks in to my first term, I'm able to support this resolution and we could get things going.
Thank you so much, Representative Bowman. Good thing you're on the right call. This is a call full of organizers, so I'm very excited to have you here, and I think you're speaking to the right group of people. So I'm going to now move to Representative Dingell and ask a bit about how do we ensure that some of the most important pieces of Thrive, like directing at least 40% of the investments to Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, actually make it through Congress and are a part of the final bill.
So we got to work. We have to work very hard to do that. But I kind of want to build on what was just talked about, and that is, so we got to make sure everybody's at the table. And especially a lot of people, this country's been torn apart. It's been torn apart by fear and hatred. And we've, January 6th just was, what we saw this summer in terms of Black Lives Matter and what we saw, the insurrection in the Capitol, that's been dividing the country. And one of the things is that while some of labor were part of discussions last year, a lot of core unions were, especially manufacturing unions, like the UAW, the steel workers, people who were worried about their jobs weren't at the table. And they're scared to death. You don't know there are a lot of workers out there. First of all, SEIU does it. We've got to work harder to get you represented and paid a decent wage when you're doing caregiving. We've got to do that. But there are a lot of workers in manufacturing that have lost their jobs. There were Teamsters who worked a lifetime and have lost their pensions. UAW workers who don't know if their jobs are secure. The steel workers who we need to bring them in, have them at the table, and we need to make sure they're going to be there for the new jobs that we're going to bring here. We're not going to keep shipping jobs overseas. We've got to create those jobs here. When you talk about electric vehicles, an internal combustion engine has more parts than an EV does. But we're going to build that battery here, not in China or Asia, right, Ed? You're going to help me build that battery right here with American jobs. Ed and I are going to, nobody can handle Ed and I working together right now. But it scares them. But we're going to do that. And that's what we have to do. And we got to tear down walls. We got to not, this summer, I think one of the people that Tricia Duckworth was with, we did about 25, 26 Black Lives Matter walks, marches, protests, but they were organized by young people. We went into Roseville, Michigan. Is got to be one of the most, I want to use the right word, I don't want to get in trouble tonight, but nobody could believe that there was ever an event there organized by the kids who just had a conscience and wanted their parents to think about racial justice. And other people were there too. So what we have to do is engage. We got to bring everybody. You got to unite people. You got to make them feel like they've got a piece of it. And by the way, when you're talking about going home for district work periods, you should check. First of all, no one knows what a district work period is because we're all videoing and zooming all the time anyway. Schedules are flipping all the time. Don't wait till then. Start now. Start telling people it matters. And you just stay focused, you keep working. And if you got it done, I bet Ed Markey never thought he'd see General Motors do what he did this week. But we never gave up. We put him at the table to keep fighting.
Thank you so much, Representative Dingell. And yeah, to the point of this, the uprising this summer absolutely, I think, was a transformative moment for millions of people. And it is something that, racial justice is clearly something we need to be bringing to all forms of policy going forward. So I appreciate that point that you were making. I now want to pass it to Senator Markey to talk a bit about, what lessons we can learn from the legislative fights of 2009 to 2011, when that was the last time the Democrats had control of Congress and the White House. I believe you're on mute, Senator Markey.
That's an excellent question. In 2009, Henry Waxman and I from California, we drafted a bill that reduced greenhouse gases by 80% by the year 2050. We got it passed through the House of Representatives. Now, we built an incredible coalition that included the AFL-CIO. They endorsed the bill. So with the support of private sector, environmental groups, consumer groups, religious groups, and the AFL-CIO all endorsed it. And what happened? Well, unfortunately, the fossil fuel industry had too many friends in the United States Senate who then blocked it. And what we were able to do is get that bill passed with an incredible coalition, including the unions, the whole AFL-CIO, because we took care of them in that bill. We built in the provisions that the AFL-CIO wanted. And so Debbie's right. As we move forward, we have to make sure that we talk to the unions, because that's how we did it the last time. That's how we're going to do it this time. And in the Green New Deal, we actually did say union jobs. We actually did say that it had to be prevailing wages. We put it in. But we also realized back in 2009 and 2010 that we had the inside muscle, but we didn't have a movement. We didn't have a movement. And that's what the Green New Deal has now created. We have a movement. We have political muscle. They saw the 18 to 34-year-olds turn out in historic numbers built around this issue. In my race for the Senate last year, in races all across the country, they saw young people rising up and leading on this issue. And so it's now 2 years after we introduced the bill, and a lot of people were saying, well, why did you build in all of that about racial justice and everyone is entitled to housing and food and jobs? Why did you build that into the Green New Deal? Why did you build in intersectionality? Why did you do it? And now everyone says, how did you know you should build in racial justice? How did you know you should build in economic inequality? And so this movement now has the muscle which we need. And I agree with Debbie. We have the momentum right now. And as she's saying, every year I used to come out on the floor and make the amendment to increase fuel economy standards. And every year General Motors would oppose it. And up until last year, they were actually siding with Trump in his efforts to water down the fuel economy standards that are based on the law I got passed in 2007 to increase fuel economy standards to 54.5 miles per gallon. Obama used that law. And now, thank God, General Motors, the other companies, they're now saying, we can do it. We support the elimination of the internal combustion engine by the year 2035. So much of this is because of the politics of 2020, Joe Biden winning, the Sunrise Movement, the Green New Deal movement, the inevitable, and it's global as well, as we know. And so the lesson of 2009 through 2010 is you need a movement. You need political muscle. And that's what this incredible meeting tonight all represents. And so we need you to be in this fight and battling, because we can win big this year in the Biden administration and in the United States Congress. And Debbie and I and Jamal, this is a coalition that is going to become unstoppable with all of your support.
Thank you so much, Senator Markey. Absolutely. A lot of us have been struggling for a long time. We heard from Tom earlier, one of the veterans of this movement, that this has been something we've been on the path toward for a while. And in this moment, there's been a lot of convergence of forces, of movements, of organizations in formations like the Green New Deal Network. And I think that's definitely, we're in a good position to make big advances. And so that's really exciting. I want to pass it back to Representative Bowman to talk a bit about, what's giving you hope right now.
That's easy. All of you, this movement, and what you all have done over the last few years, to Ed's point. I mean, 2 years ago, the Green New Deal resolution was introduced. And when I launched my run for office in, 2019, June 2019, every forum, every debate, every panel asked me about the Green New Deal. And it's because of the work you all have done and the intersectionality of it, and the fact that I'm just so blessed and fortunate to be, in Congress in this moment in our nation's history. I've, as a Black man in America, I dream every day of a better world. So to have this agenda that we have focused on racial justice, focused on indigenous justice, focused on environmental justice, focused on our intersectional work and truly it's all about radical care and radical love for the environment, for our community, for our families, for each other. This is just policy in alignment with that. So I'm excited by all of it, and being an educator for 20 years, I'm one of those people that always drew inspiration from my students and their ideas in terms of how we can change the world. This is the same thing right here in this moment. This is what we're all doing. This is what we're all about to do. We just need to continue to do the work to make sure our colleagues in Washington understand that this moment is not just about saving the planet. It's about their legacies as well. They often resist this level of transformative change when we focus on communities of color and communities that are hurting. But I think this is their moment to build an America that meets the ideals of our Constitution and the ideals of our democracy. So I'm just excited by all of it.
Oof, I felt that. The idea of radical care and radical love at the center of the type of economy we want to build, at the center of the policies we're putting forward. I feel like that's so critical, so important. I want to pass it also off to Senator Markey again. What's giving you hope in this moment?
Well, again, it's young people, it's the movement. It's just so powerful. It's changed the way in which people view climate change. So climate change was always viewed as a very important issue, but the intensity level politically was relatively low. So everyone would say, yeah, it's a big problem, but low in terms of priorities. Well, that has changed over the last 2 years. Now, the intensity level is as high as the science and the health and the economic and the moral dimensions of this issue have always been. But now the politics is there. And so that's what's giving me hope. And I think that the talk that we now have of members of the Senate using the reconciliation process, 51 votes to do good things, the debate that we're having about repealing the filibuster so that we can do big things. And by the way, not just in climate, but minimum wage, to ensure that we deal with gun safety issues, to make sure we can deal with immigration issues, that discussion is now absolutely real. And we're going to have to look at that ultimately as probably the final step that we will have to take this year. And so I have great hope because none of this would have been discussed 2 years ago. None of it. But it is today. And it's young people. And so I felt that in my campaign last year that I let young people lead me. And if we let young people lead, we're going to solve this problem. We're going to have a set of solutions that we are able to put in place. When Deb Harlan and I introduced the Thrive Act last year, Debbie is now the leader over in the House on this issue. But when Deb Harlan and I introduced it last year, who would have thought that she would become the Secretary of Interior in our country? This is change. This is what the Thrive movement, the Green New Deal is forcing into the political system. And so I just think we don't end this Congress until we have fundamentally changed the way people view all these issues, the intersectionality of it, but that we're going to save all of creation by engaging in massive union job creation, and that we're going to do it in a way that has 40% of the funding going to communities of color, vulnerable communities, those who have always been disadvantaged. So I can feel it happening amongst my colleagues in the Senate. This is how they're talking now. This is what their discussions include, the language that the people in this meeting have helped to create over the last 2 years. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Senator Markey. Yeah, absolutely. The moment has shifted, and the moment is now. And it's, all good strategists are able to identify, when the conditions have shifted, how you can then move ahead. And I think we're in that type of moment right now, and it's really exciting. And I'd like to close out with Representative Dingell. As we all know, the challenges that are before us are immense, and as is the need for us to organize. So, yeah, same to you. What is giving you hope in this moment?
So, all of you, first of all, that we're on this call in the middle of this pandemic, caring that Jamal's my colleague, that Ed Markey and I are working so closely together, that Donald Trump is gone, that science is back, just to do some basics. But what gives me hope is, Ed, I'm going to disagree with you on one thing. We need all of the young people, and all the young people that are on, you make such a difference. But when I'm home and I refer to the young people get mad at me and say, we're not all young. The reality is those that are supporting Thrive are young and old. We're uniting from all different parts of the country, from all different demographics, in fighting for what's the future of our country. And I have a lot of hope that together, united, I keep using Joe Biden's word, united, we're going to get this done.
Can I agree with Debbie? I would like to agree with her. When AOC endorsed me, she said, it's not your age, it's the age of your ideas that are important. And these issues now have an intergenerational compact. Young and old joining together, realizing that this is the historic moment in time.
Absolutely. It's definitely the politics, I think, and the idea of prioritizing, the people over, corporations and over things that have put the environment last and put people's well-being last. So I really appreciate you all joining us tonight and offering so much to us all. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to be passing it over to Tom to close us out. And just to say for a moment how important it is that we're part of this larger intergenerational movement, and I think it's a really an incredibly exciting moment to be in, and really important to have allies in the halls of Congress as we're doing the outside game and doing a lot of the work in the streets and organizing our people. So thank you again to all the folks who joined us tonight, and I'm going to pass it to Tom.
Thank you, Margaret, and thank you for asking those really great questions. And wow. Thank you all for joining tonight. Every one of you, the audience, the viewers out there, civil society, the public, the grassroots, the youth, the speakers. Wow. Remember, let's take action right now by going to that website that Varshini mentioned earlier. I don't know if it's going to be on the screen, but it's linktr, linktr.ee/Thrive Agenda. And write to Biden and your representatives in Congress. Thank you for writing to Biden, and thank you for contacting your members of Congress. We shake your hand. We have a huge opportunity now and responsibility and duties ahead of us. We have a lot of work to do together. Along with our indigenous peoples, our original peoples of this country, our native front line, the water protectors holding the line, and our indigenous leaders, youth, women, and elders, and our native tribal governments, we're all concerned about the recognition of our treaties and the protection of the territorial integrity of the sacredness of Mother Earth and Father Sky. And we're glad to be in this fight with you. Thank you very much, everyone. Wopata tanka, haumitakia wase. Thank you.